Hello, Originals. I'm so glad to be a part of this weekend broadcast with you. And today we're going to talk about meeting God when we feel discouraged. Have you ever felt discouraged? Of course you have. It's a very common feeling, this weight and this loss of heart, this loss of courage, feeling really tired and perhaps even being fearful and plagued with a sense of doubt. Doubt about ourselves, whether we're enough, or doubt about whether God is enough. I've been there as well. Sometimes we can really suffer from a grasshopper complex, where we're discouraged before we even get started. You know, like the Israelites in Numbers 13, when they had been sent out to look at the promised land, the very place that God had brought them to the edge and they were ready to step into. And they went to look, and part of the group came back and said, there's no way. In fact, the majority report was, there's no way we can do this. We're like grasshoppers in their eyes. There's giants in the land. So they were discouraged before they ever got started. They felt tired before they'd even crossed into the promised land. Some of us, though, have been tired when we're caught in the middle. We've started, we know there's an end, but we don't know when we're going to get there. And so we're in the middle of this journey. It's very messy, what Brene Brown and others call the messy middle. And it feels dark and weighty. There's setbacks, there's regular maintenance, there's failures, there's difficulties, and then there's just being unsure about how to take the next step. And so we're discouraged in the middle. We feel tired while we're there. And then there's the critical endings complex, where it didn't end well, something that we had just finished, and we feel so critical, and we feel crushed, we feel disappointed, and that kind of sick and tired kind of discouragement can set in, where we're fearful about anything that might come next. We're fearful of a critical word, and we're wondering again, perhaps, if God is enough. The text we're going to look at today is where God is addressing a people tenderly and lovingly, encouraging them to enter into a journey back to Jerusalem, back to and into His promise, that He is going to be the one who brings freedom. He's the one who's going to bring forgiveness, and He's the one who's going to bring them into a fullness. But they're discouraged before they even get started. Can you imagine being invited into a 700-mile walk? Well, this is what it's like for the exiles who are in Babylon. God is about to invite them into a journey from Babylon back to Jerusalem. It's a 700-mile walk. But those exiles there in Babylon, most of them, I would dare say all of them, have never been to Jerusalem. They've only heard their parents and grandparents, perhaps, speak of them. For 70 years, this particular group of Israelites have been in exile there in Babylon. Now, to the Babylonians, they had just been taken captive. But in the viewpoint of God, they were in exile because He had sent them out of Israel. The rulers of Babylon had completed the judgment of God by bringing them out, and now God was preparing to bring them back. So we're going to read in Isaiah chapter 40, beginning in verse 27, where God is addressing the discouragement factor that might have been in the hearts of many who heard this idea of returning to Jerusalem. So beginning in Isaiah 40, verse 27, God says, "Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord. My cause is disregarded by my God. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary, and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I love this passage. It reflects a turn in Isaiah where God is now speaking to a people who've been under judgment and is going to bring them back. And he's promising them that he is going to bring them back. And so he wants to address their discouragement. In fact, the beginning of chapter 40 begins with God speaking in the council. Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. And then the record here from Isaiah goes on where he speaks of God saying, see, the sovereign Lord comes with power and he rules with a mighty arm. See, his reward is with him and his recompense accompanies him. He tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those who have young. Can you imagine preparing for a 700-mile walk? It would be like walking from Vancouver all the way to California, to Sacramento. It's a long walk. It's a longer walk than going from Vancouver to Calgary. It would be a long walk full of dangers, crossing over different nations and people groups. It would be a dangerous journey for them, in which they would face uncertainty and not knowing. In fact, some in Babylon had actually become quite successful. And so the beginning of this journey would mean they would leave behind a measure of success and security that they had. It would mean they would leave behind what they already knew. And so they were discouraged before they even got started on this walk. Do you know, discouragement works like poison in our lives. It captures and latches on to the fears that we have. And it causes us to doubt ourselves, but also to doubt the goodness and character of God, to even doubt the power of God. So through this passage in Isaiah 40, the prophet addresses their fear of the nations, their fear of the other gods or idols, their fear of the rulers that would be in these lands, the fear even of leaving Babylon and perhaps provoking the wrath of those who would say, where are you going? And this is mutiny, a kind of rebellion. And discouragement can often take hold in our lives in that way, where we're fearful about what others are going to think, and it becomes such a weight in our life, where we are unable to take hold of what God would give to us, where we're unable to actually implement and do and take the next steps to move towards what God has promised us, or to take hold of the vision and heart that God has given to us and to see it come into reality. Discouragement will paralyze us and get us stuck in one place. Discouragement often reflects in a kind of tiredness before we even get going, a kind of tiredness when we're stuck in the middle, and a kind of I'm sick and tired when we get to the end and feel very critical about what's going on. In fact, in those moments we could say, well, what's the use of serving God? And so God addresses the complaint. Notice he says in verse 27, why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord? My cause is disregarded by my God. In those discouraging moments, we can feel unknown, unseen, unappreciated, and uncared for. We can feel forgotten. And so, the voice of the Lord here is a call and a reminder to say, Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. It's as if he's saying, look, there's no place where you can go where God cannot see you. There's no place where you can hide from the Spirit of God. But God is able to find you and see you. He is the God who sees you. And then the prophet goes on to say, listen, this God will not get tired. Notice he says in verse 28, he will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives. And this is so important for us to recognize about God, who is gracefully revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. This God gives. Notice he says in verse 29, he gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. So if you're tired, if you're discouraged, these are the moments to recognize the goodness and power of God. He says, even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. There's the recognition of our tiredness. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Therein is the promise of God for his sustaining care for us, to carry us, to encourage us, to give us strength when we feel tired, whether we're young or we're old. God is about preparing us for the journey. God is about sustaining us in the journey. And God is about bringing us to the end of that journey. So the call to action here is for us to put our hope in the Lord who renews our strength. To take hold of the promise of God and let him nurture hope. Let him build up and nurture courage in our lives. To build up our hearts. So how are we to do that? Well, he says wait. In some ways, waiting seems like a passive activity, but when waiting is spoken of here in the scripture of our relationship on God, it speaks of an active trust, where we're activating trust in our lives so that we are looking to God. We're looking to him. And so we want to spend daily time looking and waiting upon God and enlarging our view of God. Sometimes our sense of God is too small, and so we must have an enlarged view of God. Against the splendor of Babylon, these exiles would see power and strength and wealth, and they would perhaps be fearful of leaving that and going back. But this journey that God was going to set into their lives was something that he would sustain them for and in. And they had a history of God addressing the grasshopper complex. In fact, even here in Isaiah 40, the prophet alludes to this and says that to God, the nations and rulers themselves are like grasshoppers. There's this perspective of God who sees all and has power in which to move all. It says in verse 22, he sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, and its people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy. And so what kind of God do you have your view on? Do you see in the revelation of Jesus Christ who God really is? This God who has all power, who comes to us and meets us in our weakness? Because we're so often forgetful and find it difficult in our discouragement to actually consider God, we need reminders of the goodness of God. And so the prophet here uses very dramatic language to speak of how God encourages and lifts up those who feel tired, if they will put their hope in the Lord. It says he will renew his strength and they will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And so we all need reminders. I've had this reminder that Ellen cross-stitched for me of Isaiah 40 verse 31. And at times I pull it out and I put it up where I can see it and be reminded of God's promise and the call to continually wait on Him. I've also found reminders in the work and effort of the people of God, people that God has gifted along the way. So at the front of my Bible, I have a song printed called The Other Side of the World by Rich Mullins. And in it, he says that the other side of the world is not so far away as I thought it was, as I thought it was so far away, but the other side of the world is not so far away, and the distance just dissolves into the love. And the New Jerusalem won't be as easy to build as I hoped it would be, as I hoped it would be easy to build. But the New Jerusalem won't be so easy to build. There's many bellies to fill and many hearts to free. Got to set them free. But I see a people who've learned to walk in faith, with mercy in their hearts and glory on their faces. And I can see the people, and I pray it won't be long until your kingdom comes. And I know that the gates of hell are not prone to prevail as I thought they were, as I once thought they were prone to prevail. But I know that the gates of hell, they have been destined to fail. And I see Satan impaled on the sword of the word, on the sword of the word. And so we take up the sword of the word against discouragement, and we set these promises before us. Some of us may feel very discouraged by current events and things that are going on, and we feel that, oh, is there ever a once and for all solution? There is. At the cross, Jesus provided a once and for all solution, but we do not yet see it all fully realized. And so still, when we make a few steps forward against racism or against some kind of impatience in our lives, we may find we've pulled back a bit, and we may feel a little discouraged that our progress has not been as great as we had hoped. Perhaps we've taken a test and failed. Perhaps we've experienced a critical ending that really sets us back. These are the moments when we need not look to any nation. God did not want them to look to Babylon or to any other nation. He did not want them to look to any of the idols. He wanted them to look to Him. So He says, wait on the Lord. The writer of Hebrews recognized that a people under pressure could get discouraged. And so he says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before Him, He endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider Him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The best remedy against discouragement is to look to Jesus. Let's do that now.